The knock on Zuri's apartment door was not just a knock. It was a demand, a hard fist pounding on the thin wood. It came at midnight, the hour when only bad news travels, the hour when the city is quiet but the mind is loud. Her hands, rough and chapped from her second job cleaning offices, trembled as she fumbled with the deadbolt. She already knew, deep in her stomach, who it would be. They never came just to say hello. When she pulled the door open, the dim hallway light framed her father. His face was a mask of cold stone. His eyes, which she once looked to for warmth and approval, were now just holes of black disappointment. Behind him, hiding in his shadow, was her younger sister, Ebony. She was crying loud, gasping sobs that Zuri knew by heart. They were tears of performance, tears designed to get a reaction. Without a single word of greeting, "No, how are you, Zuri? No, sorry to bother you so late." Her father reached into his pocket and threw a crumpled piece of paper at her feet. It landed on her worn-out welcome mat, a stark white square against the brown. "Bank notice. You'll pay this," he said. His voice was flat, without emotion, as if he were telling her to take out the trash. "Every single coin. You're the only one who can fix this mess." Zuri froze. Her body went stiff, the blood draining from her face, leaving her skin feeling cold and tight. He wasn't asking. He was ordering. He was commanding. She looked down at the paper, the red-stamped "Final Notice" blurred before her eyes. Then she looked back at his hard, unmoving face. The air in the hallway was thick and cold, smelling of dust and her neighbor's cooking. She hesitated. Just for a second. A tiny spark of rebellion, a no that died on her lips. His eyes narrowed. He saw her hesitation, and his next words came like a slap, shattering the last tiny fragile piece of love she held for him. "If you won't help your own family, then you are no daughter of mine." That night, something inside Zuri, something that had been bending and cracking for years, finally snapped. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She simply watched them turn and leave, her father's stiff back, Ebony's theatrical sobs fading down the concrete stairwell. Zuri closed the door, locked the deadbolt, and leaned her forehead against the cool wood. She packed one small bag, looked at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror one last time, and disappeared. No note, no goodbye, no trace. But what she was about to do, the new life she was about to build from the ruins of the old one, would shake the entire family to its very core. Zuri had always been the one everyone depended on. She was the fixer, the safety net, the strong one. When the lights went out because a bill was forgotten, it was Zuri who paid the reconnection fee. When bills for food and rent piled up on her father's table, it was Zuri's paycheck that covered them. When Ebony failed her classes again, or lost another job, or needed money for a new dress, it was always Zuri who had to fix everything. She worked 2 jobs, one serving tables until her feet ached, the other cleaning empty, silent offices late into the night. She barely slept, living on cheap noodles and coffee, and still she sent money home every single month without fail. Her father never said, "Thank you." He never said, "I'm proud of you, Zuri." Instead, he always compared her to her younger sister. "Why can't you be more like Ebony?" he'd ask, even as Ebony sat on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. He called Ebony the bright one, the one with potential, the pretty one. Zuri would just smile, a tight, tired smile, and stay quiet, hiding the deep exhaustion behind her tired eyes. When Ebony made a series of bad, foolish investments with money she didn't have, and lost all of it, she ran crying to their father. He didn't scold Ebony. He didn't tell her to get a job and pay it back. Without thinking twice, he picked up the phone and called Zuri. "You're successful, Zuri," he had said sternly over the line. His voice was hard. "You have your own apartment. You have good jobs. It's your duty to protect this family. It's your duty to fix Ebony's mistake." His words hit her like a stone. It wasn't a request. It was an order. The same order she had been obeying her whole life, in different forms. Zuri wanted to say no. She wanted to scream that she was tired, that she had dreams, that her success was built on her own sweat and pain. But the fear of being called selfish, of being called a bad daughter, held her back. She looked around her small, clean apartment. Every piece of furniture was bought second-hand. Her sofa had a small tear she had sewn up herself. Her bookshelf was full of worn paperbacks. Meanwhile, Ebony wore designer clothes, always had the newest phone, all bought with borrowed money, her money. Every memory of sacrifice flashed in her mind, one after another. The time she skipped meals for a week to pay her father's rent. The nights she cried silently on the long bus ride home, her body aching from her 16-hour day. The dreams she had given up, the university course she wanted to take, the small art class she wanted to join, all so they could live comfortably, so Ebony could have potential. And yet, in all those years, not one person had ever asked, "Zuri, are you okay? How are you feeling, Zuri? What do you need, Zuri?" That night, after her father's final cruel words, as she sat by her window staring down at the sleeping city, something in her heart began to change. The tears wouldn't come anymore. They had all dried up. Instead, a calm, cold silence filled her chest, the kind of absolute stillness that comes right before a big decision, right before the storm hits. She realized she had spent her entire life trying to prove her love, trying to earn her place in the family, but no one had ever, not once, tried to prove their love for her in return. Zuri stood up and walked to the bathroom. She looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror. The woman staring back at her looked strong, yes, but she was exhausted. Her eyes had dark circles beneath them, her skin was pale. She was loyal, but she was forgotten. She leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass, and whispered to the woman in the mirror, "I can't keep saving people who don't see me. I can't keep setting myself on fire to keep them warm." Her father's voice still echoed in her head. "It's your duty. You are no daughter of mine." But this time she didn't listen. She went to her closet, folded her work uniforms, and placed them neatly on her only chair. She made up her mind. For the first time in her 26 years of life, Zuri chose herself. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know where she would go. But one thing was crystal clear, sharp as glass. She was done being their safety net. She was done being their solution. And that small, quiet act of choosing herself changed everything that followed. By the time the first gray light of dawn touched the sky, painting the clouds in shades of pink and orange, Zuri was already gone. She packed only one small backpack, a few changes of clothes, her small box of savings, and one book she loved to read. She left her smartphone on the small table beside her bed. She looked at it for a long moment, knowing it was a chain. She took it, they would track her down. They would call, they would beg, they would threaten, and she would break. She turned it off and left it behind. Her resignation letter for her jobs lay on her desk, short and simple. "I'm leaving. Thank you for everything." She locked the apartment door behind her, the soft click sounding like the end of a chapter. And she didn't look back. As the city of Lagos slowly came to life, with the sounds of street vendors and old buses, Zuri sat on a bus, heading far away, to a place where no one knew her name. The crowded streets she once knew, the buildings she had cleaned, the roads she had walked while tired and defeated, all disappeared behind her. Along with them, she let go of every painful memory that came with them. For years, she had carried her family's weight on her small shoulders. But now, for the first time as the bus picked up speed on the open highway, that weight began to lift. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed peace, even if it meant starting from nothing. Back home, her disappearance caused chaos. After a day of no contact, her father went to her apartment. He banged on the door, and when she didn't answer, he got the landlord to open it. He found the empty room, the neatly folded uniforms, and the phone on the table. He was furious. He was outraged. He told everyone, their relatives, their neighbors, that Zuri had abandoned her responsibilities. He told them she had shamed the family, run off like a coward. Ebony, seeing her shield was gone, cried to the neighbors, telling them a different story. She said Zuri had run away with the money that was meant to pay off her debts, painting her sister as a thief. The The rumor spread quickly. People whispered. Zuri, the good daughter, had lost her mind. Zuri had found a secret, rich man. Zuri had run away in shame. No one, not a single person, thought to ask if maybe, just maybe, she had just been tired of being used. Zuri's name became a topic of gossip, a warning. Her father refused to eat for 2 days, calling her ungrateful, selfish, and cold-hearted. Abani told anyone who would listen that Zuri had betrayed them in their darkest hour. But none of them knew the truth. None of them understood. Zuri hadn't run away to escape guilt. She had run away to find herself. After a long journey, she reached a quiet coastal town called Odomi. The air smelled of salt and peace. The streets were not crowded. Children ran barefoot along the beach, their laughter mixing with the sound of the ocean. Fishermen mending their nets greeted her with warm, simple smiles. No one knew her name. No one knew her past. No one knew the pain she carried. For the first time in years she could breathe. Really, truly breathe, all the way down into her lungs, without fear of judgment. She rented a small, clean room near the shore. She sat by the window every evening, watching the waves crash gently, one after another, washing the sand clean. She felt free. Not completely healed, not yet, but alive. The noise of Lagos, the angry demands, the constant expectations, all of it felt like a bad dream, slowly fading away. Zuri didn't know it yet, but her quiet disappearance, her simple act of walking away, would soon shake her family to their very core. Because while they told the world she had vanished in shame, the truth was that she was finally learning what it meant to live. In Odomi, Zuri began a quiet, simple new life. She spent her mornings walking along the beach, feeling the cool, fresh air fill her lungs and the early sun warm her face. She watched the fishermen bring in their morning catch. For the first time in years, there were no ringing phones demanding money. There was no heavy guilt weighing on her heart. There was just the sand, the sea, and the sky. But even in this newfound peace, she couldn't ignore the restlessness inside her. She was a builder. She was a fixer. She wanted to do something meaningful, something that gave her life purpose again, but this time a purpose she chose. One afternoon, while buying fresh mangoes from the local market, she saw a small handwritten notice pinned to a community wall. Community center hiring volunteers for digital classes. Help our children learn. Without thinking twice, she went there. The center was small, with cracked painted walls and a roof that looked like it might leak in the rain. It had a few old computers, monitors humming loudly. The children ran around laughing, their clothes simple but their eyes full of hope and curiosity. Zuri offered to help teach them, to show them how to use technology and basic finance. The coordinator, an older woman with a kind face, welcomed her warmly. Within weeks, the girls at the center began to adore her. They called her Teacher Zuri. They listened closely to every word she said. She taught them how to use a computer, how to write an email, how to save money wisely, and how to dream bigger than their circumstances. Her heart, which had felt so broken and empty, healed a little each day as she watched them grow confident, as she saw the spark of understanding in their eyes. That was where she met Kofi. He was a quiet and humble man who repaired phones and computers in a small, cluttered shop next door to the center. He often stopped by to fix the center's broken devices for free. He would stay afterward, leaning against the doorframe, just to watch Zuri teach. There was something about her calm strength, her gentle patience, that caught his attention. He saw the sadness that still lingered behind her smile. One evening, he found her sitting on the steps outside the center, staring at the sea as the sun went down. There were tears in her eyes, though she tried to hide them. He sat down a few feet away, not too close, and asked softly, "Why do you always look so sad after doing something so good for these children?" Zuri hesitated. She hadn't told anyone her story. But something about his gentle presence made her feel safe. She whispered, "I left my old life because no one saw my worth. I gave everything I had, but it was never enough." Kofi looked at her for a moment, then at the ocean. He said just as gently, "Then let the world see your worth this time." But this time, do it on your own terms. Those words stayed with her. They echoed in her mind all night. On your own terms. That night, Zuri couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Kofi's words. She thought about how many women just like her must feel the same way. Invisible, unappreciated, trapped by family expectations and duty. The next morning she took out a new notebook. On the very first page she wrote 3 words. Charisse, Africa. That was the birth of her dream. It wasn't just a class anymore. It was an initiative, a small program to help women learn financial and digital skills, to give them the tools to make them independent, to give them a choice. It started with just 5 girls in that tiny classroom, using 3 second-hand laptops that Kofi helped her repair. But Zuri poured her whole heart into it. She taught with love, with patience, and with a purpose that burned brighter than her pain. Slowly, her small, powerful idea began to grow beyond the beaches of Odomi. She didn't know it yet, but destiny was preparing something far bigger than she ever could have imagined. Zuri's small classroom in Odomi slowly turned into something bigger than she ever dreamed of. The girls she taught, filled with new confidence, began sharing their stories online. They made simple videos recorded on old phones. Videos showing how teacher Zuri helped them learn coding, how she taught them to create budgets, and how they were now opening small online businesses, selling crafts or offering services. People started to notice. What began as a small, local effort suddenly reached beyond the town, then beyond the region. Within a few months, Charisse, Africa became known as a movement. It became a symbol of hope for women who wanted to break free from poverty and old traditions. Journalists began writing about it. Social media posts about the mystery woman in Odomi, empowering girls through technology, went viral. Non-profit organizations, NGOs, and even private sponsors from other countries contacted her, offering to fund her programs, to help her buy new computers, to help her reach more women. But Zuri didn't let the new attention distract her. She worked harder than ever. She used the funds to rent a bigger space, to hire other teachers. She trained herself. She traveled to nearby towns, setting up small workshops, training volunteers, and helping new centers open. Each time she stood before a new group of girls, she reminded them of the same powerful message. You do not have to wait for anyone to save you. You can build your own life. You have worth all by yourself. Her humble nature, her focus on the work and not on herself, made people love her even more. But what no one knew was that Zuri, the celebrated founder of Charisse, Africa, was the same woman whose family, back in Lagos, had accused her of betrayal and theft. She kept her real identity, her full name, hidden. She used only her first name, Zuri. She didn't want fame. She didn't want her past to come back and destroy the new life she was building. All she wanted was to keep moving forward, to build something lasting and pure. Meanwhile, life back home in Lagos was falling apart. Abani's lies had caught up with her. The money she owed, the money she had tried to force Zuri to pay, kept growing with interest. The people she had borrowed from were no longer patient. They were not kind. Debt collectors, big, angry men, started visiting their father's house, demanding payment. They shouted in the street. They banged on the gate. The once proud man who had shamed Zuri, who had told her she was no daughter of mine, now lived in fear. His neighbors, the same ones who had gossiped about Zuri, now whispered behind his back, saying the Moro family had lost everything, that their pride had led to their ruin. One afternoon, as men shouted outside their gate, threatening to break it down, her father sat on the floor of his living room, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't hold a cup. He thought about all the times he had called Zuri selfish, all the times he had made her feel small, while he praised Abani. He remembered how Zuri used to bring him food after her long shifts, how she paid his bills without a single complaint, how she always smiled, even when he knew she must have been tired. The memories stabbed his heart like sharp knives. Abani cried helplessly beside him, pulling at her hair. "Papa, what will we do now? What will we do?" He closed his eyes, his face crumpled in defeat. And he whispered words he once swore he would never, ever say. "I wish Zuri were here. He didn't know that miles away, in a quiet coastal town, the daughter he had rejected was now lifting hundreds of families out of poverty, while the home she once saved time and time again was slowly falling apart without her. Months went by, and the cracks in the Morrow family's life grew into deep canyons. Ebony was drowning in debt, and every lie she had told was beginning to fall apart. The people she owed money to were no longer just shouting. They were angry. And one of them, the one she owed the most, finally went to the police. That was when the real truth came out. The loan Ebony had taken, the biggest one, was not even in her own name. She had used Zuri's identity and old documents she found in the house. She had forged Zuri's signature to secure the money, thinking Zuri would just be forced to pay it, or that she would never find out. The news hit their father like a storm. He couldn't believe his ears when the police came knocking on their gate one morning. They weren't debt collectors. They were officers in uniform. They held a warrant in their hands and asked to speak to Miss Zuri Morrow. Her father's face turned pale, a sickly gray. He stammered, "Zuri. Zuri doesn't live here anymore. She left." But when the officers showed him the documents, the loan agreement, everything was clear. It was Ebony who had done it. The signature badly copied. The bank papers. The entire fraud, all in Zuri's name. The neighbors gathered outside, whispering and pointing. The same people who once praised the Morrow family's name now spoke with open disgust. "So this is how they lived," one woman said, loud enough for him to hear. "Greedy and shameless," another replied. "They used that good daughter until she ran away, and then they used her name." The humiliation was unbearable. Her father tried to defend Ebony at first, telling the police she was young, that she was foolish, that she didn't know what she was doing. But deep down he knew. He knew this was the result of his own choices. He had spoiled Ebony, believed every lie she told, and ignored Zuri's silent pain, her quiet sacrifices. Now everything had fallen apart. His house was under investigation. His reputation in the community was destroyed. And the daughter he once called useless, the one he had thrown away, was gone. Celebrated somewhere far away for changing lives. As the police questioned Ebony, she broke down completely, her performance tears replaced by real, terrified sobs. "I didn't mean to hurt Zuri," she cried. I just thought she would never come back for it. I needed the money." But her tears couldn't undo the damage. Her actions had brought shame not only on herself but on the entire family. The story spread fast through the town, and soon everyone was talking about it. The great Morrow family, people whispered, ruined by their own greed and their own favorite child. Her father's health began to fail. The shock and the shame were too much for him. He stopped eating. He stopped going out. He spent his days sitting in his dark living room, staring at Zuri's old photos from when she was a girl. Every time he looked at her smiling face, guilt tore him apart. He remembered the night, that awful night. He threw the bank notice at her feet and told her she was no longer his daughter. Those words now haunted him like a curse, repeating in his mind over and over. Late one evening, as he lay weak on his bed, his body frail, he whispered to the empty room, "Zuri, sorry. I'm so sorry." But it was too late. No one knew where she was. She had vanished into a new life, one she had built from pain, strength, and a purpose he had never bothered to see. And while her first name was being celebrated around the world for helping others rise, her own family had fallen under the heavy weight of their pride and their greed. One calm evening in Odomi, Zuri was sitting in her small, busy office. She was checking emails and reviewing plans for her next workshop. She was happy. She was at peace. She had no idea that her old life was about to crash into her new one. Kofi walked in quietly, holding his phone in his hand. His face was filled with surprise and something else. Concern. "Zuri," he said gently, his voice low. "You need to see this." She looked up curiously, a small smile on her face, which faded when she saw his expression. He handed her the phone. On the screen was a news clip playing on social media. The video showed a bright, smiling reporter standing in front of a large, fancy banner that read Global Innovation Awards. The reporter was speaking excitedly. And this year, one of the top nominees for the Social Impact Award is the founder of Cherise, Africa. A woman who has transformed the lives of hundreds of girls across West Africa. As pictures flashed on the screen, pictures of her classrooms of the girls she taught of her, Zuri froze. It was her face, her work, name. She had always avoided attention, but now she was everywhere. Kofi smiled proudly beside her, but Zuri's expression slowly changed as the next part of the report played. The journalist's tone grew softer, more mysterious. What makes this story even more incredible, she continued, is that her family has been looking for her for over a year. They say she disappeared without a word, and they've been searching ever since, desperate to know she is safe. Zuri's heart stopped for a moment. Her past. Then she heard her father's name mentioned, and the reporter even showed an old photo of her family, one from years ago, with her standing stiffly beside a smiling Ebony. Her past, which she thought she had buried, was suddenly standing right in front of her again, broadcast for the world to see. She sat there in complete silence, staring at the phone. Kofi waited for her to say something, but she didn't. After a while he asked softly, "Zuri, will you go back? They are looking for you." Zuri placed the phone down on the table, her hand shaking just a little. She sighed deeply, a long, tired breath. Her eyes filled with tears, the first one she had shed for her family in a very long time, and she tried to hide them. "Go back," she repeated quietly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Go back to what, Kofi?" She looked up at him, her eyes shining with old pain. "To the people who called me selfish. To the ones who threw me away the moment I said no. To the father who told me I was not his daughter." He stayed quiet, just listening, his presence a comfort as she continued, her voice growing stronger. "They buried me long ago, Kofi. In their hearts, I stopped existing the night I walked out that door. I built this life. I built it from nothing, from the pieces they broke. I did it not because they helped me, but because I had no one else." Her voice trembled, but there was strength behind every word, a resolve made of steel. Kofi said gently, "Maybe they've changed, Zuri. Maybe they're sorry. Maybe they just want to see that you're okay." Zuri shook her head slowly, turning to look out the window at the ocean. "They didn't care if I was okay when I was breaking. They didn't care when I was working 2 jobs, when I was skipping meals. Now that I've built something beautiful, now that the world is watching, now they remember me. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure they deserve to know I survived." She stood by the window, looking out at the endless waves as the wind brushed against her face. The world finally knew her story. But the ones who should have valued her first were the last to see her worth. When Zuri received the official email inviting her to Lagos for the Global Innovation Award ceremony, she sat still for a long time, just staring at the screen. Her name was written boldly among the top nominees. Zuri Moro, founder of Cherise, Africa. Her full name. Her heart raced. Lagos. The city she had promised herself she would never return to. The city that held all her pain, all her bad memories, and her family. She wanted to ignore the invitation. She wanted to delete the email, to stay hidden and safe in Odomi. But Kofi gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Zuri, this is your moment. This isn't about them. This is about you. This is for all the girls you've helped. You worked hard for this. Don't let your past steal your shine. Go and claim what you've earned." After days of thinking, of wrestling with her fear, she finally agreed. She would go. Not for them. For herself. The award ceremony was held at a grand, glittering hotel in Lagos. The night she arrived, the city lights seemed to sparkle just like they used to. But she felt different now. She wasn't the tired, broken girl who had fled on a bus. She was stronger. She was free. Dressed in a simple but elegant gown that Kofi had helped her pick out, Zuri walked into the grand hall. Cameras flashed from every corner. Journalists whispered her name, pointing. People, important people, leaders and innovators. stood up to applaud the woman who had changed so many lives. She smiled politely, her heart calm, her spirit grounded. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have prepared for, was that sitting quietly in the very back row, hidden in the shadows, were her father and sister. They had come after seeing her face on the news, after hearing she would be here. Her father's hands shook as he clutched the seat in front of him. He could hardly breathe. The daughter he had once shouted at, the one he had called ungrateful and selfish, now stood on a stage, being honored by the most important people in the country. Ebony sat beside him, tears streaming down her face. Not the fake tears of before, but real hot tears of shame. Regret burned deep inside them both, a physical pain. As Zuri's name was called, she took the stage to receive her award. The audience clapped loudly, a thunderous sound. The host smiled and said, "This woman has not only taught skills but has restored hope to countless girls across Africa. Please welcome the visionary behind Charisse, Africa, Zuri Morrow." The sound of her own full name echoed in the hall, and for a moment Zuri's chest tightened. It was the first time she had heard her full name spoken publicly since she left home. She stepped up to the microphone, her eyes glistening but steady. Her voice was soft at first, then grew stronger with every word. "To every woman," she began, pausing as the room grew quiet, hanging on her every word. "To every woman who has been told her worth depends only on what she gives to others. Remember, you do not owe anyone your peace. You do not have to break yourself to keep others comfortable. Sometimes walking away is not giving up. Sometimes walking away is how you start living again." The crowd rose to their feet in a powerful standing ovation. Many people were wiping tears from their eyes. Cameras zoomed in as she smiled gracefully and held up her award. In the back row, her father could no longer hold himself together. His face turned pale, his shoulders shook violently, and tears, hot tears of grief and guilt, fell freely. For the first time he truly saw her. Not as the daughter who left, but as the woman who rose. After the ceremony ended and the crowd began to leave, Zuri walked quietly backstage, still holding her award in her hands. Her heart was steady, not racing like before. She had done it. She had faced the city, the people, the memories, and she hadn't broken. As she turned to leave, she suddenly heard a soft, trembling voice call her name. "Zuri!" She froze. That voice. She knew that voice. Slowly she turned around. Standing a few feet away, looking small and broken, were her father and Ebony. Her father looked much older than she remembered. His once strong, proud shoulders were now slightly bent. His eyes were red and filled with a deep, bottomless regret. Ebony's face was wet with tears, her makeup smudged, her lips trembling as she stepped forward. Before Zuri could say a single word, Ebony dropped to her knees on the floor, crying uncontrollably. "Zuri, please," she sobbed, holding her hands out. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean what I said back then. I was jealous. I was so stupid. Please, please forgive me." Zuri felt her throat tighten. Memories flashed. The insults, the laughter behind her back, the constant demands. The night she left home with nothing but a small bag and a heart full of pain. She looked down at her sister, her voice calm but firm. "Ebony," she said softly. "You meant every word back then. And that's what hurt the most." Her father stepped closer, his voice low and shaky, broken. "My daughter," he began, his eyes glistening. "I failed you. I let my pride destroy our home. I thought I was teaching you strength, but all I ever gave you was pain." Zuri looked at him for a long, long moment. There was no anger left in her. The anger had burned out long ago, leaving only sadness, and now a strange understanding. She could see now that they were both broken in their own ways, trapped by pride and old wounds. She took a deep breath and spoke gently. "You didn't fail me, father," she said. "You just didn't believe I could stand without you. You didn't believe I had worth on my own. But now you see that I can." For a moment silence filled the room, broken only by Ebony's quiet sobs. Her father's lips trembled as he nodded slowly, tears rolling down his weathered cheeks. Ebony kept crying, whispering apologies that faded into the quiet air. Zuri stepped forward and placed a hand on her father's shoulder. It was not the gesture of a child seeking love. It was the gesture of a woman offering peace. "I forgive you," she said softly, and she meant it. "I forgive you both." But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It means letting go. Her words hung in the air, gentle but final. She gave them one last look. Her father, broken by guilt, and her sister, drowning in tears. Then Zuri turned away. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of peace. As she walked toward the exit, her award held firmly in her hand. The lights from the stage glowed faintly behind her, casting a calm, strong glow around her figure. For the first time in years, Zuri felt light. Not because they had finally apologized, but because she no longer needed their approval to feel whole. Zuri didn't return home after the award night. She could have. Everyone expected her to. The news channels were still talking about her speech, calling her the woman who rose from rejection. But instead of going back to her old house, to her old life, she stayed in a quiet apartment she had rented, overlooking the city lights. She had built a new life, one that didn't revolve around pain, guilt, or trying to prove her worth to people who refused to see it. A few weeks later, she learned that her father and Ebony were still struggling. The debts they had tried to hide, the ones not related to the fraud, were piling up. The house they once took so much pride in was close to being taken. Zuri sat for a long time thinking about it. Then she made a quiet decision. She called her bank and arranged for every single debt in the Moro family's name to be cleared. But she did it anonymously. No one would ever know it was her. She didn't want their thanks. She didn't want their tears. She just wanted peace. Through her organization, Charisse Africa, she also made sure Ebony received help. A counselor was assigned to her, and soon after, a job placement opened in one of Charisse's partner programs in a different town. Zuri approved it silently. It was her way of saying, "I forgive you. Now go build your own life," without ever needing to speak the words. She never called. She never wrote. She never showed up. Months passed. Her father, confused, tried to find out who had cleared their debts, but the answer never came. Ebony guessed it was Zuri. And sometimes at night she would cry, wishing she could tell her sister how sorry she was, how much she had changed. But Zuri stayed silent. Not out of anger, but because she had learned that peace, real peace, sometimes means distance. Her life became calm, simple, and full of purpose. Every morning she woke up early, made tea, and watched the sunrise from her window. She spent her days mentoring young women, helping them believe in themselves, just like she once had to learn to do. She didn't crave recognition anymore. She had finally found something she never had while growing up: stillness. At night, when she lay in bed, she often thought about her family. She thought about them not with bitterness or anger, but with a quiet, sad acceptance. She wished them healing even from afar. Her heart had no hate left in it. It only carried lessons. Back in her hometown, her father often sat on the veranda, holding an old photo of his two daughters. He would whisper Zuri's name and stare into the distance, realizing too late that her silence said more than any words ever could. For him and for Ebony, that silence became a heavy echo, a constant, painful reminder of what they had lost, and of the unconditional love they had once taken for granted. Zuri, on the other hand, had finally learned that closure doesn't always come from hearing the words, "I'm sorry." Sometimes, closure comes from choosing peace over pain, and distance over drama. She had forgiven them, truly and fully. And in that forgiveness, she had finally, completely, set herself free. Months later, Zuri found herself standing on the grand stage of a global women's conference in Nairobi. The hall was massive, filled with thousands of women from different countries. Leaders, dreamers, and fighters, all gathered to hear her story. As the lights dimmed and a single spotlight fell on her, Zuri took a deep breath. She could feel her heart beating, not from fear but from pride. She looked at the faces before her, row after row of them. Faces that reminded her of her past self. The girl who once begged to be seen. The woman who once cried in silence. And the soul who once walked away with nothing but faith in herself. Slowly she began to speak. Her voice was calm yet powerful, and it filled the entire hall. Sometimes, she said, walking away isn't weakness. It's how you save yourself. They will call you selfish. They will say you owe them your life, your money, your peace. But I am here to tell you. One day your silence, your success, and your peace will tell the story they tried to bury. The audience went completely silent for a moment, and then applause erupted like thunder, a wave of sound that shook the room. Many women in the crowd had tears in their eyes. They weren't just hearing her words, they were feeling them. Her message, her story, spread across social media within minutes. Zuri stood there, smiling gently as the crowd rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. Reporters cheered her name. But her heart stayed humble. She wasn't there for fame or attention. She was there to tell women that survival didn't make them weak, made them powerful. Later that night, after the ceremony had ended, Zuri stood on the rooftop of her hotel, watching the Nairobi skyline glitter in the distance. The cool night breeze brushed against her face as she thought about how far she had come. From the girl who ran away from Lagos with nothing but a backpack, to the woman now inspiring the world. Kofi joined her quietly, holding 2 cups of tea. He handed her one and stood beside her, looking out at the same skyline. After a few moments of comfortable silence, he said softly, "You disappeared once to escape them." Zuri turned to him with a peaceful, knowing smile. Her eyes glowed under the city lights as she replied, "Now I disappear into peace. And that's a debt I don't owe to anyone." They stood there together, side by side, the world quiet around them. For the first time Zuri felt complete. She had walked through fire, she had found her strength, and she had built a new name from the ashes of her pain. And now, she didn't need validation, apology, or revenge. She only needed peace.